Just now, Khenpo spoke about the key concept of bodhicitta and discussed altruism. He emphasized the importance of cultivating an altruistic mind in practice. It's not enough to just understand this topic. We also need to put it into actual practice. Now we'll open the floor to see if anyone has any questions. You may ask Khenpo questions. You can ask about what he just discussed or any other questions related to Buddhism.
I am a teacher in the philosophy department. Although my field is Western philosophy, I'm particularly interested in Buddhism. I have some confusions. Some are about daily life and some are more theoretical. For example, if I'm walking down the street and come across someone who needs help, but I also have something extremely urgent that I need to do, if I stop to help them, I will end up delaying something very important that I have to do. But if I don't delay my own matter, then I can't help them. What should I do in this situation? There's another thing that confuses me. Suppose I happen to encounter a beggar on the street who is asking me for some money. What if he's actually a scammer? There are so many scammers these days. Should I give him money or should I not?
That's a great question, teacher. First, it depends on how strong your altruistic intentions are. If your sense of altruism is particularly strong, then when someone is in a life-threatening situation, even if your own matters might be delayed, as long as your own life isn't in danger, you might feel compelled to save them. But if someone doesn't have a strong sense of altruism, then even if they don't have anything particularly important to do themselves, they might still have all sorts of concerns and hesitations. So they wouldn't save that person's life. This is all relative, of course. Everyone makes decisions based on how much they value their own life and how much love they have for others. As for encountering scammers, this is something we also talk about in Buddhism. Generally, when giving alms, you should also find out whether the other person is truly in need. You need to use wisdom to make that decision. If you realize you're dealing with a scammer, you definitely shouldn't give them anything. But some people treat all those who seem pitiful as scammers and refuse to give anything at all. The real reason they don't give is that they're a bit stingy themselves, but they use the excuse that these people are all scammers. Sometimes they're actually not scammers at all. From appearances, sometimes you can tell, but sometimes it's really impossible to tell. In that case, it's reasonable to take your time and observe. Of course, Buddhism doesn't require you to give to scammers or insist that you must give all your wealth to these people. When discussing the perfection of generosity, it was never stated like that either.
Hello, teacher. I am a graduate student at the School of Life Sciences. My first question is about the bodhicitta you mentioned. How should we practice it? The second question is, how do we find the right direction in life for ourselves? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Regarding the practice of bodhicitta, in fact, we have previously discussed some of Patrul Rinpoche's methods. I also briefly talked about the practice of bodhicitta just now. Actually, you can meditate on it anywhere. Offer your own happiness to all sentient beings and take on their suffering yourself. Some people feel that this is a terrifying thing to do. They worry that contagious diseases might come upon themselves, but in reality, that won't happen. The power of bodhicitta is especially strong. Therefore, its practices include the bodhicitta of aspiration and the bodhicitta of application. There are many methods for cultivating bodhicitta, such as the practice of exchanging self and others. These are particularly emphasized in texts like 3 Bases and 3 Virtues. Then, as we search for the path in life, from a worldly perspective, after attending university and graduate school, one should have found the truth of life. But for us humans, this life is not the end. There should be a continuation of life even through countless lifetimes. At this point, my suggestion is to seek out some Buddhist theories. In fact, Buddhist theories will not cause any harm to our real lives. As for the entire Tripitaka, I have basically gone through many treatises and classics from ancient and modern times, both Chinese and foreign. Indeed, Buddhism has no negative side effects on our lives, our survival, or even our values in life. None of these have any side effects at all. Therefore, seeking the path of life within Buddhism, from my perspective, is the wisest choice.
Hello, I am a student majoring in traditional Chinese medicine. Today you spoke about the altruistic mind in Buddhism. I would like to ask, does having an altruistic mind mean giving up the self? Before giving up the self, do we first need to find the true self? It's just like how you have to learn to love yourself before you can love others. If that's the case, I want to know how to find the true self, how to find myself. Thank you.
Actually, in reality, the so-called process of finding oneself can also, in many cases, be achieved through the path of altruism. For example, if you want to respect the lives of others, You first recognize how painful and terrifying it is when your own life is harmed. And through this kind of thoughtful contemplation, you are able to help others, or you gradually come to understand the true importance of the lives of other sentient beings. We can also contemplate from the perspective of the value of life. But generally speaking, in Buddhism, we say that attachment to oneself is actually the source of all suffering. Why is that? The tears we shed every day are mostly for ourselves, while tears shed for other sentient beings are extremely rare for ordinary people. So, ultimately, the true root and underlying cause of all suffering, every form of affliction, and any sense of unease or discomfort that we experience is, in fact, the self. We toil and struggle for the sake of the self, whether it's in relationships or in any other aspect. The sense of imbalance in our hearts is centered on the self. As everyone knows, for example, when your job benefits are not good, you feel especially troubled inside. And when your health is poor, that suffering is also for yourself. In any competitive process, the source of much suffering is the self. This is the deepest aspect of Buddhism. Therefore, at this time, you need to let go of the self and choose altruism. Through altruism, one can ultimately realize and attain the true state of selflessness. In daily life, I often think that nowadays many young people face tremendous life pressures, including intense worldly competition. At such times, if one possesses some level of Buddhist realization, many problems can be easily resolved. At present, this is a spiritual remedy, especially important.
Hello, Master. It's an honor to meet you. I am majoring in Chinese philosophy, focusing on Confucianism. Just now, I listened to your talk about bodhicitta and I benefited greatly from it. It made me think of the Confucian concept of Ren, benevolence. May I ask the Master to give me some guidance on this? Are there any similarities between the concept of Ren and bodhicitta? If so, what are their similarities? And what are their differences? Is there a difference in the level or depth of these states? Thank you, Master.
I think the Ren mentioned in Confucian thought, in fact, has a rather limited scope. I have also studied it, just as Professor Chen mentioned earlier. I am quite interested in some of the Confucian classics and have studied a few of them. However, the concept of Ren mainly focuses on human beings. It primarily emphasizes respect and care for elders and family members. From the perspective of its benefits, this idea is indeed indispensable in today's society. Such a sense of respect is truly necessary. But the scope of bodhicitta encompasses all sentient beings throughout the world, without boundary. And in terms of time, it extends through countless lifetimes, even up to attaining Buddhahood in the future. So many modern people may find it a bit unclear because they haven't specifically studied this field. As a result, things become somewhat vague. But if you truly delve into this field, you'll see that Buddhism is not just a fantasy. Indeed, within Buddhism, whether it's the Lotus Sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra, or the philosophies of Madhyamaka and Yogacara, they all have their own particularly profound aspects if we study them to the end. Of course, if you have no interest at all and lack any sense of fairness, then all you can do is reject it. There's nothing that can be done. But if you have some interest, if you have a certain passion for it, and you start to explore this field, you will discover that it truly is what people call inconceivable. So I believe that the similarity between Confucianism and Buddhism is that they both respect humanity and possess a sense of benevolence toward many aspects of human life. This is what they have in common. As for their differences, there are certain distinctions in terms of their breadth and depth.
Hello, I am a graduate student majoring in Buddhist studies. I have two questions I'd like to ask. The first question, I'd like to ask you to briefly introduce, based on your own experiences and what you have seen and heard, whether you could compare the important differences between Han Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism. Secondly, I'd like to know more about the current religious situation in Tibetan region. For example, religions other than Buddhism, whether these religions and Buddhism have any conflicts or contradictions. Similarly, there are also many sects within Tibetan Buddhism. Are there any contradictions or other relationships between these sects? Thank you.
Around 1987, our Lama went to Mount Wutai and came into contact with Han Buddhism. At first, we knew nothing at all, but now we basically understand some of the differences between Han and Tibetan Buddhism. Han Buddhism has always emphasized vegetarianism, meditation, and chanting the Buddha's name. There are some very good characteristics in this regard. You could say that in some aspects, Tibetan Buddhism can't quite compare. Tibetan Buddhism, including debate, has a method of debate where many of a person's doubts can be resolved on the spot. Also, it's similar to modern higher education, with levels progressing from elementary school to university and doctoral graduation. This kind of step-by-step academic degree system involves systematic study layer by layer over about 10 to 20 years. Another thing is that many lamas in Tibetan Buddhism, they all go through long-term debate, composition, and teaching. After being evaluated through these aspects, teaching, debating, and writing commentaries, they are then awarded a qualified and official Lama degree, and so on. But overall, I think it's all Mahayana Buddhism, and there aren't many differences between them. However, I sincerely hope that in the future, Han Buddhism will not only be promoted within temples, but should also be spread among the general public, including universities and some people in society. We need to communicate with each other, learn from one another, and create such opportunities. I think this is also very important at present. Many people are especially devout, but tend to focus a bit too much on outward forms. For example, worshipping the Buddha, burning incense, or obtaining a refuge certificate in temples. Actually, these are just representations within Buddhism, not the true essence of Buddhism. True Buddhism is when our hearts are completely devoted to the Buddha. So, what is the purpose of taking refuge in the Buddha? What are the benefits of taking refuge in the Buddha? Also, we truly need to give rise to the altruistic bodhicitta, because in Mahayana Buddhism one must have bodhicitta, otherwise you simply cannot be considered part of Mahayana Buddhism. Even if you practice in temples every day and do many, many good deeds every day, if you do not have the intention in your heart to liberate all sentient beings as vast as the sky, then it cannot be called Mahayana Buddhism at all. But nowadays, many Buddhists consider themselves, when others ask them whether they follow Mahayana or Hinayana Buddhism, they proudly say, I am a follower of Mahayana Buddhism. But if you claim to be Mahayana, do you actually have bodhicitta? Many people are quite blind about this. So now, even within Buddhism, there are more superficial aspects than ever. As for the essence, those who, after truly studying, can understand the true principles of Buddhism, there are still relatively few. This is a rather obvious point. Generally speaking, in Tibetan regions, including Christianity, Taoism, and other ideologies, have basically never existed throughout history. Now, in a very few places, there are some, but only a tiny minority. For example, in my hometown, I heard there are only a few Christian households, but even that has basically disappeared now. So, up to now, Christianity has never really flourished there. As for other religions, perhaps in a few isolated places, including some areas of Tibetan regions in Gansu, there is some presence of Islam. But it has never been particularly widespread or commonly practiced among the general population. Buddhism, on the other hand, has flourished and prospered in the Tibetan regions ever since around the year 333 AD, and it has continued to thrive, develop, and play a significant role in society up to the present day. Although there have been many different dynasties throughout the long and complex history of the region, with periods of both prosperity and decline, ups and downs. Even when Buddhism faced suppression under Langdama, but up to now, our lineage and system have remained completely intact. That's why, even today, many countries in Southeast Asia and the West are also embracing Tibetan Buddhism. Within Tibetan Buddhism itself, whether it's the Gelug, Sakya, Nyingma, Kagyu, or Jonang among the 8 major schools, within these 8 schools, in a few isolated places, there may be some minor discord due to differences between the schools. Looking back at history, there were indeed a few isolated incidents in certain places. But nowadays it should be said that the various schools coexist in great harmony. Moreover, everyone acknowledges that one must first give rise to bodhicitta, then accumulate merit along the path, and ultimately attain Buddhahood. So, in general, there really aren't any conflicts.
We are a group of Tibetan university students studying at Shandong University. First of all, thank you very much. There are more than 90 Tibetans here. We only found out about this just this afternoon. And there are many campuses, each one spread out across the area. So there are a smaller number of people who could come this afternoon. We are very grateful to Khenpo for coming here today to give us a teaching And we are also very grateful to the university for providing us with such an opportunity to see our teacher, to see Khenpo. We are truly excited. I also heard during class that Khenpo was coming. Normally, I don't really know how to ride a bike, but I just hopped on and flew here. I originally wanted to go back to the dorm to get a kata, but I didn't have enough time, so I couldn't bring it. We mainly got to know Khenpo through the internet, primarily online, and through various online platforms. Khenpo has done a lot, like animal releases and those kinds of videos. When we watch them, we really feel a deep connection. We also often watch Khenpo's videos and similar content. Today, what I mainly want to ask Khenpo is this: whether we are Tibetan university students or just university students in general, when we study at universities inland, the space or conditions for us to study Buddhism and related things are very limited. So how should we go about this? What channels or methods should we use to study? Another point is that as Tibetan university students, when it comes to studying Buddhism, there are actually quite a lot of us who are really enthusiastic and passionate online. Everyone is studying Buddhism with a very serious and proactive attitude. So Khenpo, please online make more educational videos and similar resources and content for us to learn from. Thank you. Otherwise, if it's through other means, we have too few ways to study.
First of all, you are here, which could be considered living in a foreign place. It's really not easy to stay here with such a spirit of learning. Actually, for everyone, when you arrive in a place where everything is unfamiliar, whether it's for studying purposes or for living, perhaps temporarily or even for a longer period of time in a different community, and especially when you have to survive within such a large group of people, there are definitely some difficulties and challenges for everyone. In terms of knowledge, we really do not lack much, especially when it comes to Buddhism, where all living beings are equal and all seek the truth. Therefore, when it comes to learning, whether it's the Han tradition of traditional culture or the Tibetan tradition of traditional culture, both are truly worth cherishing. Actually, as I mentioned earlier, in the Han tradition, Shandong, Confucianism has been the mainstream culture for probably over 1,000 years, whereas in our Tibetan region, the mainstream culture is Buddhism. But now, not long ago, I also spoke at a university in Qinghai. Many of our Tibetan university students don't pay much attention to Buddhism. In terms of understanding Buddhism in the schools I visited, many Han University students and teachers in the field of Buddhism have done in-depth research on Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism. When you compare this situation, many university students and teachers in our Tibetan region do not pay much attention to the subject of Buddhism, and this is especially true when it comes to Tibetan Buddhism. There is such a trend of not taking it seriously. So first of all, I sincerely hope that while you are enrolled in and attending university, especially in this unique and transformative period of your life, you should not only study Tibetan Buddhism, but also study Han Buddhism and other outstanding cultures of different ethnic groups. Another thing I want to remind you is many Tibetan university students, after going to Han areas for university, when they return, their own language and script are completely forgotten. They can't even recall their own parents' names. Just kidding. Maybe there aren't any who can't recall their parents' names, but basically they no longer speak Tibetan. I find this really unfortunate. Many university students from the Han region go to study abroad in the US, the UK, or elsewhere, but when they return, they still speak their original, very fluent Mandarin or Chinese. They don't come back and only use English to communicate with their parents. Basically, I've never seen such a case. And many people from the Han region, including monks and intellectuals, when they go to study in Tibetan areas and return, they still use their own language and script as usual. But now perhaps it's also a trend of the new era. Many university students, including many I used to know, including some university students I used to sponsor, after enrolling in certain universities in the Han region, after 4 or 5 years, they've basically forgotten their own language and script entirely. This is truly a pity. There's no need for us to learn a new language or script and then abandon our mother tongue. This kind of thing, as far as the Han region is concerned, has never been seen before. Therefore, I especially hope that many of you Tibetan University students here today will learn from the fine traditions of other ethnic groups on the foundation of your own language and script. This is extremely important, please remember.
Respected Master, I would like to ask a question. There is a saying in Buddhism, see through illusions, let go, be at ease, go with the flow, recite the Buddha's name. Is it about seeing through illusions, letting go, being at ease, going with the flow, and reciting Buddha's name? We need to first understand the truth about the universe and human life. Then we understood. Let go again, achieve freedom and acceptance. Because in many situations now, when we don't understand something, our first reaction is not to believe it. Very few people have such great virtuous roots that when you tell them about the Dharma, they immediately believe it is true and then put it into practice. But there is another matter I would like to ask the Master to guide us on. How, in our daily lives, can we give rise to bodhicitta in our hearts, in principle and in practice? Many times, because in daily life, the first thought that comes to mind is still about myself. Even though I keep reading a wide variety of different articles or scriptures to cultivate myself, in the end, I still feel like I'm centered on myself. This is quite troubling for me as well. I asked the Master for some guidance.
Actually, from the perspective of Buddhist theory, there's no need to start by letting go, seeing through, or being at ease. Some Buddhist theories do involve letting go, while others do not require it. This includes good deeds bring good results, bad deeds bring bad results, and practicing virtuous actions. These cannot be let go of. If you let go of everything, letting go of both doing good and committing evil, then it would be the highest state of meditative concentration. In fact, the phrase letting go and seeing through is considered to be a slogan of a relatively high level within the tradition of Chan Buddhism. Under this particular slogan, of course, there are some individuals who truly have seen through all worldly matters and are genuinely ready to become monastics, that is, to leave behind their lay life and enter into the monastic community. There are some people who, although they haven't become monastics, have no attachments at all. For these people, first they see through things, then they let go, and then they attain freedom. In the end, even when benefiting sentient beings, they go with the flow and can travel anywhere. This is something that many eminent monks and great masters in history have been able to achieve. It's like the actions of a postdoctoral scholar, which can't be compared to those of an ordinary elementary school student. At the very beginning, you seek to learn, and by the time you reach the postdoctoral level, you should already be able to go with the flow in many aspects of your work. At that point, everything that needed to be learned has already been mastered. You've reached the highest level. This is also the case in Chan Buddhism and likewise in Vajrayana Buddhism. In the end, many actions are simply natural and follow the flow of conditions. Perhaps, without systematic study, if we only examine or consider the highest state and carefully apply it to the daily life of a beginner, it might seem a bit contradictory, but in reality, things should be approached in stages. We should apply bodhicitta in our daily lives. This is extremely difficult, but it is also very necessary. Because bodhicitta, indeed, I often think about it myself. I've been studying Buddhism for such a long time, and I also practice a little when I have time. But often my very first thought is about myself. Sometimes I develop particularly negative thoughts about fame or personal gain. There are so many worldly concerns, and at those times I feel especially ashamed. But in those moments, it's important to recognize one's own faults. So we often see that in the biographies of Atisha and some of the great sages of the Kadampa tradition, from their gradual realizations bit by bit. At first, they were always thinking about themselves every day. Gradually, they came to realize the importance of benefiting sentient beings and the toxic nature of self-centeredness. If you keep comparing in this way, little by little, the cultivation of bodhicitta progresses step by step. You could say it happens subtly and imperceptibly. It's not something that can be accomplished in a day or two or even a year or two. But when the time is right, you could say it comes naturally and effortlessly. It arises spontaneously, and at any moment, anywhere, you can bring it to mind. Many great masters, including some in our own institute, also put in a great deal of effort in the beginning. But later, whether in their daily conduct or in their speech, they always put the benefit of sentient beings first in everything they do. Gradually, in daily life, you should be able to apply it freely at any time and place.
Hello, Master. I have a question regarding today's topic. Buddhism teaches us to cultivate altruism and the bodhicitta to guide our actions. It clearly emphasizes the motivation behind such actions. I'm wondering if this kind of consideration might lack a bit of utilitarian perspective, that is, whether it doesn't pay enough attention to the consequences of actions. Because it may happen that we generate bodhicitta but do not achieve the results we expected. Sometimes we might explain this by saying it's due to inescapable karma. I'd like to ask the Master, are there more utilitarian considerations regarding actions themselves in Buddhist scriptures? Okay, thank you.
Actually, this is what Buddhism emphasizes the most. Why is that? In everything we do, the mind comes first. Buddhism teaches that all phenomena begin with the mind. In other words, whatever we do in this world, including the 4 points you just mentioned, regardless of whether it's the initial motivation or the final outcome, everything is carried out according to the plan in your mind to achieve the final goal. So, in Buddhism as well, if we truly wish to help any sentient being, absolutely and unconditionally, regardless of their circumstances or situation, each life has a different karmic connection. The benefit they ultimately receive should be said to be different as well. But during this process, he never gave up and served wholeheartedly. In this way, all the actions of a bodhisattva, from beginning to end, are entirely focused on caring for others. Therefore, in our worldly life, we can also think this way. If a person, a worker, devotes their whole body and mind entirely to society, then in the end, the public benefit they create will naturally emerge. If not, then trying to achieve it through other means will likely make it very difficult to obtain more effective measures. So, when we reason from a general perspective, a person's mindset is extremely important. If you possess a sincere and genuine heart, you will definitely achieve your goals.
Hello, Master. I studied media and graduated this year. Personally, I have been practicing Buddhism and eating vegetarian for 2 years. It was at the beginning of this year that I took refuge and also began formally studying the words of my perfect teacher. Every week, I study along with your videos. I also sincerely, from within, truly hope that all sentient beings will be well. And I genuinely hope to attain realization in this lifetime to benefit all beings. But in the beginning, I was able to get up at 5:30 every day, recite sutras daily, and do 200 full prostrations and so on. But as time went on, after a month or two, some inner laziness and even feelings of aversion gradually started to arise. I saw in your Dharma text that a good practitioner should practice every day throughout their life as if each day were the same, maintaining a regular practice. But I found my willpower isn't enough. I feel extremely guilty about this. At the same time, my wish to help others is very strong, so I live each day in great inner conflict. My Dharma brother said, that's how it is. The greater your aspiration, the greater the obstacles you face. So I wanted to know, why is it that the bigger your aspiration, the greater the obstacles and difficulties you face? I also hope you can tell me, how can I better overcome these internal and external obstacles and difficulties? Thank you.
First of all, I sincerely want to express my truly heartfelt admiration for your spirit in practice. But I don't agree that the greater your aspiration, the greater the obstacles, because no matter which Dharma practice you follow, it's true that sometimes people say, the higher the path, the stronger the demon. When your practice improves, there may indeed be some of that. In the secular world, people also say, the taller the tree, the more it catches the wind. There are sayings like this too. The broader your mind or the more successful your endeavors, the more obstacles you may encounter around you. This does happen, but it's not the same for everyone. It's not so uniform. For some practitioners, as their practice improves, all obstacles gradually disappear. This also happens. So, regarding the fellow practitioner you just mentioned, sometimes what some people say isn't entirely correct. But people around him, pretending to understand, say something to him. And because he often trusts them deeply, he tends to take it as a Vajra word, regarding it as a truly precious and invaluable maxim. So, I personally do not see it that way. But indeed, it's possible that when practitioners first start out, they are diligent, but gradually, some laziness creeps in. However, as you gradually come to understand the importance of practice and the real significant benefits that studying Buddhism can bring to your life, once you truly gain those benefits, you probably won't give up because of the positive impact it has on your life. Of course, as people living in a big city, it's inevitable that you sometimes have countless worries. This is hard to avoid. But I believe that as your practice becomes more and more diligent, obstacles will become fewer and fewer. And in the end, your achievements will come faster and faster.
Hello, Khenpo. I am a student from the University of Chinese Medicine. I have a small question. There is a saying, no trade, no killing. I often see at the school gate or by the roadside people selling animals like turtles and fish. With the intention of saving living beings, I want to release them back into the wild. But this act itself is still a form of transaction. So sometimes I feel doubtful or even guilty about this behavior. If I think about it in a more extreme way, could there be people who specifically catch these animals just to sell them to you for release?
This phenomenon does exist, but as true practitioners of animal release, we should always be observant. I often say that we don't necessarily have to release animals on a fixed schedule. If we do it regularly, for example on the 10th day of the first lunar month, then people will specifically catch crucian carp and make preparations for that day. Although Buddhist festivals are highly meritorious, in order to save more lives, we don't have to release animals on a set schedule. Therefore, to avoid such times, we can release animals at any time. In this way, even butchers and others may not necessarily be able to catch them. After all, animal release is something we do only rarely. For example, in a month, you might release animals once or twice. For a Buddhist, these 1 or 2 times, no one knows exactly when during those 30 days you will do the release. So for someone to catch animals every day for 30 days just because of your release, I think that's not really feasible. So the problem may not be that serious.
First, I am grateful to the Master for your teachings. I believe the world depends on our mind, and the mind depends on our thoughts. I would like to ask the Master once again, how do you give rise to your intention and thoughts? My second question is, in this life, one should achieve something. Could you please share with us what your achievements are and where they lie?
First of all, I don't have any particularly outstanding or special kind of motivation. No matter what good deeds I do, I always try my best to correct my own mindset. But sometimes the habitual tendencies of ordinary people accumulated since beginningless time are not so easy to change. Personally, I don't have any other achievements to speak of, but in my heart I always rely on the truth of the Dharma. Indeed, over many years I have also studied with great determination and consistent diligence. Through this dedicated study, I have personally gained a great deal of valuable knowledge. It is truly a kind of wealth for the mind, a wealth of wisdom. This kind of wealth is something that each and every one of us, everyone in all the different corners of society today, especially those who are suffering, those whose hearts are rather impoverished. How wonderful it would be if these people could obtain it. That is my only mindset. Other than that, I have no so-called achievements.
I am Professor Chen's doctoral student. I'd like to ask about the altruism in Buddhism. It possesses an element of initiative. For those who passively receive altruistic actions, will proactive altruistic actions have certain karmic effects on the recipient? Will it create a certain cause and effect impact? Is there any conflict between altruistic actions and their karmic consequences? Is there any point of conflict between the two? For example, if I take the initiative to help someone, might they end up owing me something or something like that?
Generally speaking, when it comes to engaging in actions that are considered bad or morally questionable, the debt or burden that is incurred as a result of those actions tends to be more painful or difficult to bear. But if I help someone and they didn't intentionally ask me for assistance, in other words, I am helping him purely out of my own initiative, for example, saving this life. After saving this life, does he have to repay me with his own life? No, that's not necessary. We can also see this in the stories from Buddhist scriptures. Maybe I had some karmic connection with him in a previous life, but regardless, when I save him today, acting out of my own genuine kindness and compassion, in fact, by doing so, it truly gives his life a real and meaningful chance to be reborn, to start anew, and to experience a fresh beginning. Such an incredible and unique opportunity later on in the journey of my own life, a moment that truly stood out to me. He should feel some gratitude toward me, but this gratitude will not cause him any hardship.
I am a student in the Faculty of Arts. Because I haven't taken refuge in Buddhism, I have many doubts. I'd like to ask just one question now. Most other religions generally believe in gods, for example, God or Allah. But in Buddhism, it seems like what we believe in is the Dharma. That is to say, there is the Buddha who spreads the Dharma. But before the Buddha, there should have already been a world. A world existed prior to the existence of the Dharma. So I want to ask you, could you please tell me how exactly did this world come about? Who created it and what is its true nature?
First of all, I am very pleased that in our research or discussions like this, there are both Buddhists and non-Buddhists. It's very interesting that different schools of thought can understand each other from the perspective of Buddhist thought and Buddhist views. In fact, even before the Dharma of Shakyamuni Buddha, there were countless Buddhas who appeared in the world. Actually, it is not only Shakyamuni Buddha. It's not the case that there were no Buddhas before Shakyamuni Buddha. According to the ancient history recorded in Buddhism, but regarding this history, our earth or our world, we do not recognize or acknowledge so-called gods, deities, or the idea that someone created it. Because if someone were to create it, was every detail created through deliberate thought or without thought? If it was created through thought, there are still many aspects that cannot be clearly explained. Therefore, in Buddhism, we believe that this world was truly created by causes and conditions. The principle of creation through causes and conditions is also explained in the Vajrayana text, the Kalachakra Tantra, as well as in other Buddhist texts, including the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra. It is also explained in the Abhidharma Kosha. Therefore, all things arise due to causes and conditions. Whenever all the necessary causes and conditions are present, anything in the world can come into being. This applies not only to the world itself, but also to everything we have now, such as the various plants of the 4 seasons, spring, summer, autumn, and winter. All of these arise from causes and conditions. Buddhism has many doctrinal explanations for this point.